I'm Josh Cheney. I'm an industry manager at Autodesk, exclusively focused on construction technology.
And my name is John Hall. I'm a construction integration specialist at Autodesk. There we go. So working directly with BIM 360 with our integration partners.
Yep. So this session is the first of three. We've invited several of our integration partners to come up and really talk about their technology, how they're integrating into BIM 360, and then how we're all trying to move the industry forward. So real quickly, we'll get this out of the way. This is a safe harbor statement. Our lawyers force us to put this in play, but it's relevant for today's courses in here because some of the features we'll be talking about are available and ready today. Others are future looking, so it's relevant that we have this in place. I'll talk a little bit about why we started the BIM 360 Integration Partnership Program. Following up on the shoulders of Peter Diamandis in there next door, data is king. For anyone that doesn't know who Clive Humby is, he's a mathematician. He also started the rewards program for Tesco, and he is the first person that coined the phrase, data is the new oil. Has anybody heard that saying before? Yeah.
I think so.
Yep, cool. So I'm a big believer in this, and I think interoperability is one of the best ways to break down data silos. So really, if you look at BIM 360, we've tried to create BIM 360 as a common data environment, a CDE, and then offshoots of that common data environment, whether it's our products in-house or third-party applications that are pushing and pulling information in and out of our applications. How? So historically, Autodesk has been a company that was focused on either building or buying software. We've made several acquisitions. Symbol is in here today, one of our more recent ones. But we've also gone the path of starting to partner. So this is a bit of a paradigm shift where Autodesk has realized we can't control everything in the world when it comes to AEC. So instead, we've decided to go down the path of partnering with all kinds of different applications across a vast array of different workflows across really what I consider the four pillars of a construction project: design, pre-con, building, or execution, and then handover. All right, so this is kind of where we got things started. This was at AU in 2016. Our APIs were fresh out, and we turned to a couple of our customers to take it through a beta process and really understand how they were leveraging the APIs. All right, so here's kind of the construct of BIM 360 itself. Across the top, you've got the different pillars of a project or a project life cycle. You've got reporting capabilities, you've got the data, and then you also have all of that sitting on top of Autodesk Forge. So Autodesk Forge is really just a host of different microservices. It's really what connects everything across our applications. All right? So if I look at it a little bit differently, think of, again, that stack where Forge is sitting on the bottom of the tech stack. It's really the lifeblood of what connects our applications. When you sit all of the different BIM 360 applications on top of that, you've got a tremendous amount of different tools that you can use inherently inside of the application or you can tie into. So, depending on what it is that the software that you're looking to integrate with BIM 360 does, then we feel like we've got 8 or so different great areas for interoperability. Right? So that creates a pretty powerful tool that we then leverage our Insight tool to report on. Third-party applications have their own reporting mechanisms also.
So let's go through the who. So if you go 2 years ago, like Josh just said, 2 years ago, we had nobody. We rolled this program out. So nice empty slate. Last year, we had 21 live integrations at AU when we came here. Made a ton. That was all Josh Cheney and the team. There was the other people on this team weren't on yet. And then now this year, here's our new tack. We have over 60 current live integrations into BIM 360 and many more on the horizon.
All right. So the 3 groups that we have today. So the first one is Sigma Estimates. Love these guys. They've been us since the start. They're my Denmark family. I actually went over and visited the Sigma Estimates team earlier this summer. They're using 5 different APIs in Forge. The next one up is TopCon, an amazing group. We did a webinar with their team a couple weeks ago. They're leveraging 3 of our APIs. And then lastly, Assemble. Started out as a standalone solution, received some Forge Fund investment, and now they're an Autodesk company. So,
invite Tim Kelly, newest member of the Autodesk family from Assemble, to go through some of the Assemble stuff and kind of the new rollout of some of the BIM 360 integration stuff they've got going on.
Sure.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, so just a little bit about myself first. As John just said, a brand new employee of Autodesk, coming through the acquisition of Assemble Systems. I've been a part of Assemble since around 2009, when it was born out of a BIM department within a pre-construction group at a general contractor. And at that time, what we wanted to do is understand how we can better leverage, as contractors, all of the data that's being accumulated by the design team. So very early on, we started trying to pivot this data, move it around for our purposes, and ultimately, back in, I think, either 2011 or 2012, we talked about some of the stuff that you're going to see today, which ultimately has been a really fun and long conversation with Autodesk to get to this point. Through that time period as well, a lot of grassroots efforts with our customer base today. We primarily support general contractors. We do have some owner-operators, design companies, as well as our customer base, but specifically, we've done a lot of grassroots efforts, starting in small BIM departments and growing to top E&R contractors. Our focus is primarily on quantities and how we can organize and leverage those quantities, but ultimately, you can suck or consume any of the other data, other attributes out of the model and leverage those as well. But when I talk about quantities, I'm not specifically talking about the estimating process or specifically how those quantities are leveraged for cost. I'm talking about all the ad hoc things that occur on a job site. When you're talking to the superintendent and he needs to go specifically drill into the materials needed for an activity that's occurring tomorrow that was supposed to be next week, do we have those materials on site? Ultimately, you can leverage that data really quickly to slice and pivot exactly what's required for that scope, and on the fly, get that sort of information. So it's really more about that interactive nature. When you have a question, you go ask that content and you figure out the solution. Ultimately, to do that, we have to virtually organize that data and make it consumable. So the way that we do that, and we talk about this and call it model conditioning. So that model conditioning process is going through the steps of adding your cost code or your work breakdown information. You might have things like level by level that comes directly out of the model, but you might not have area by area, which you determine during the course of means and methods. So you have to add those attributes, add that data in. As we step through our integration and workflow with BIM 360, we're looking at ways to add in machine learning to this process, add in rule creation so that it's more automated. And as you consume that model, it's automatically populating that information. So just a little bit more about the conditioning. With the conditioning, you're setting it up for those ad hoc pieces. We think today a lot different than we used to. When you guys would go on to, let's say, 2005, you go into Google, you have to provide a specific search to get to a specific website, to get to a specific set of an answer. And that might be, what's the capital of Belgium? You needed to go find the city of Brussels. But now when we think about how we search for things, you're not interested in just that. You want the ancillary data. You want the Wikipedia page, you want the pictures, the places to go see things, the events happening, other things that are relevant to that search. And so our mind has shifted through this process of consuming data differently. We now know this information is accessible. So if you think about like the top 10 Google searches, they're always really short and not specific, but it gets you to the information that you need. So let's translate that and think about that in terms of a job site, a model, or a set of project documents. What you might specifically need is the drywall that's located on the first floor in the west corridor. But you also want to see how that relates to all the other drywall. What are those other types? And you might need the quantity information, but you might also want the fire rating, or when that is supposed to be installed, or if it's even on site yet. So you have access to all of that data really seamlessly. You can actually start to navigate through, drill in deeper, go add other information, and condition it further so that the downstream effect is more information in the system and leveraged for more capabilities. So I was really excited listening to both the intro and how the partnerships are evolving and the other presentations talking about breaking down the silos, collaborating, communicating more. And this is a total change in software development of the past. And now it's all very collaborative and wanting to work together to make sure that contractors can do their work. You don't have to move everything in your company to one system to go build your process out. You can interact between systems. And ultimately, and it's funny, I actually have different logos of different products that are out there that focus specifically on different pieces, Sigma's up there. But every one of these companies is looking at how to interact and how to engage with others and ultimately move away from the import and export through Excel and more toward a uniform solution that allows you to share information back and forth. So as we step through the different pieces or parts of a project, means and methods, going through to understand exactly what's occurring on your job site, when it's occurring, the schedule, the breakdown, the views that you specifically need, you have to have a host for that. In the past, you could have created a really complicated coding structure that allowed you to connect the cost to your sheets or the cost to the schedule, but it was really difficult to follow that process. And now we have that object data, and we enrich that object data so that you can leverage all of these different pieces and all of those different solutions that are in that space and move that data between those systems. So with Assemble, let's specifically focus really quick on the object data. So not only do we consume the properties that come out of the design team, the model, let's say Revit, we get the type properties, the instance properties, all of that data is consumed. We then layer on top of that any of the other information you want to contribute. So these can be strict text fields, they can be cost code hierarchies, they can be quantities or cost information, and we allow you to organize that data in a meaningful way for that project. When you look at that within the context of a model and you're looking at a specific set of objects in the model, you can see that that group of objects has this same set of data. So we know we've defined what the area is. We've got the unit cost and a total cost associated. We've got the cost code structure, what bid package that's associated to. And so now we can start to share this information out. As we organize this data, we leverage that information to group, sort, and filter, and then send out to the project team. So with Assemble, our previous integrations prior to joining the Autodesk family were specifically related to sharing information to a bid room to provide additional context for your bid environment. Share information for project management, same thing, providing additional context for exactly what you want to see here. Sharing information to and from estimating systems. I'll get into that in just a second, as well as scheduling systems. So we're actually leveraging API technologies that are in place in both BIM 360 as well as other solutions to push information back and forth between these softwares so that you have the right data in the right place when you need it. So specifically on quantities and how Assemble leverages that data to organize things, I don't know if you guys can actually see this very well. But within Assemble, you have the ability to create a query. We call it a recipe, let's say. So we've specified exactly what we want to filter out. In this case, we're looking at the structural components. And so we may have specified that we want both structural material as concrete and structural steel. We've then organized that information by specifying that we want to first group it by level, then by category, then by type. And then we've ultimately color-coded to provide additional context there. This component, this piece, can then be pushed out to other team members. Let's say you have someone that's very new to BIM or isn't interacting with BIM at all. They don't want to go in and understand or need to understand what properties I must leverage to create that show me the walls on level 1. Ultimately, you can rely on others on your team to pre-create those views. Again, you'll see a little bit more on views in just a minute here. But ultimately, as you specify your specific quantity, you have the ability to say whether you want to use the weight by linear foot, you want to use the area or volume, and you can specify which quantity driver you're leveraging as the primary unit versus all of the other secondary units that you're going to have access to. Jumping to sheets and views, a little over a year ago, we actually released a process to publish sheets alongside your Revit model. So you have the ability to not only see it in 3D, but select that object in 3D and see exactly what sheet it shows up on and where in that sheet it is. What this has started to push is an interaction where a number of users turn off the 3D altogether, and they interact with the inventory, the grid data, and the sheets. So they can step through their takeoff process by clicking on objects in the sheets instead of using the 3D at all. So they're going through and validating the notes and things that are on those sheets and the specific information that's available there. If you come by our booth, the Assemble booth, or in the BIM 360 quantification pod, we're actually looking at the next generation of what this is and providing a 2D focus for estimators. So that means that the environment is geared more toward the 2D takeoff process than the 3D takeoff process. And a lot of really exciting things are going on there with how Assemble's technology stack of backend interacts with that information and consumes that in a bidirectional way. For the views, this is actually the project landing page, and you can see that on the left side there, those are all the models that are published on a project. Within Assemble, each of those models aren't specifically files. It's a container that can have multiple models or models that are broken apart, and that's a structure that we keep within Assemble that allows you to publish revisions. And so what we see our customers do is they'll consume data on a frequent basis so that they're actually creating a history of how that information changes. What's great about Assemble, and this is one of the key things that we did very early on within Assemble, is provide the ability for a contractor to live outside of the central file, the common environment that the design team frequently shares, and then they put the file up on Newformer or on BIM 360 Docs or elsewhere that you have to then go download, and you're in a different environment. You can't make changes to that. So what we wanted to do is actually give the ability for contractors to keep data consistently moving forward as that model changes. So as you push in new iterations of that file set or of those models, you actually have the ability to have that data you've layered on top of that persist throughout version to version. With our integration with BIM 360 Docs, what you're going to see is as design teams push their information into Docs, there'll be a direct consumption from BIM 360 Docs into Assemble, so there's no downloading of any of the files to publish from a local tool. That's a direct read, and that's actually something we'll be rolling out very soon. And I don't have any of that content in here, but you can definitely come see that process at the Assemble booth or within the BIM 360 pods. Jumping off of the versioning and the models, the views that I talked about a moment ago are organized in the main part of the page. Every team member on the project has access to these views. We wanted to be very specific about having this information commonly available. There's not view folders that go bury views to a private use. Users don't have individual views for themselves. Those views are created for the project team to collaborate on and share across the entire team. Jumping out of the views and into our schedule interaction. Within the scheduling component, we've gone through the process of integrating with P6 specifically. This is a bi-directional integration where I can go in and create links to my schedule activities and bring that data, any of that data in from the schedule system into Assemble. From there, you can leverage the Assemble mobile technology to provide feedback on actuals. When was this structural member installed? Any notes on that? And actually feed that information back into P6. What that allows for is a real-time update and a staging area for the scheduling team to incorporate feedback from the model and have provide more detailed information in that process. So what you're getting back into P6 is not only do you have that information related to when it was installed, when it started, when it finished, but more detailed than the activity, you have the individual dates of each component. Alongside of that, you have the quantities here, and you can start to look at, and in this view, again, I apologize if you can't see it from there, but we can see exactly what's behind schedule. We can see the items that have been complete, and we can see the items that haven't started yet. So again, as I mentioned before, I've been doing this in practice for a number of years, and I was a user of Assemble before I joined full-time as a product manager. And in that, I actually worked on a number of different projects, but specifically, Delta Airlines had my team build a terminal at JFK in New York City, and we leveraged this very heavily. We had team members from the field providing the feedback where in an OAC meeting, we could pull up the dashboard and look at exactly what was being installed when, and have that visual indicator of where things were behind schedule and how we were keeping track. We then leveraged this in our pencil requisitions, where we'd sit down and pull up and say, here are the items that are complete, and this is the quantity associated. Based on that quantity, you're 38% complete, but you just submitted 50% complete on this line item. Let's have a discussion. What's great about this is it's not the only lens that you can use. This is an additional lens to all of the other metrics that you manage your projects with. So this is providing that visual feedback and that more detailed data that might be associated with those specific components as you go through that process. As that, so kind of building on from the scheduling, as you incorporate that scheduled data, you can start to create engineering work packages, installation work packages, and assign those out to team members. So in this case, if we have an installation work package, we can get rid of absolutely everything else from the view except for what's relevant to that work package. From there, then you can drill into exactly what components and pieces are part of that work package and then status them appropriately. This means that, again, in those that are in the field that may not want to download the entire model and then navigate into exactly what they want to see, that means that this package is specifically created for that workflow and ultimately gets rid of any of the noise that isn't part of that work package. What you're going to start to see with our integration with BIM 360 is our views and the packaging that we're doing here will start to filter into all of the other components of BIM 360. You'll start to see that views page come through and be part of BIM 360 docs. You'll start to see some of these installation work packages filter through and become part of BIM 360 field, specifically around asset management. And you'll start to see this data shared and conditioned and organized within each and every component from the pre-construction process through execution. Locations is yet another breakdown structure that is applied typically after you get a design model from the team and organized in a way that makes sense to how you're going to build it. This might be, in this case, related to a specific skid and how it's organized to get delivered to site, or it might be on how you want to break down your concrete pours. But we have the ability to break apart the model and provide that content so that you can, again, create that package that's relevant or that view that's relevant so you understand what those boundaries are and how that's organized. The evolution of this with the location services provided by the BIM 360 team means that we'll start to bring in a core structure of breakdown that's applied across every component of your project. Rather than just the model or just the sheets, you're going to have a location service that you can status things on that particular location, and that status and that information can then be filtered down into all of the components that are part of that location. So rather than needing to go in and select the 75 components that are within a given location, you can actually provide the status or input on an overall room or an area, floor, and ultimately provide that feedback that will filter that information throughout. With cost, we have within the Assemble platform, we have an assembly-based cost structure to provide that, as I mentioned before, that really quick ad hoc discussion around cost. You can incorporate cost at an object level or a roll-up from there and leverage cost coding to directly import that. And that will provide some detail, but not a lot. And in that case, what we wanted to do is actually go interact with industry standards, and specifically we started with Sage. So we built an engagement or an integration with Sage that allows data from the Assemble platform to be pushed into Sage and leveraged and create the actual assemblies. This integration works through a product called eTakeoff Bridge that actually loads your Sage estimate, brings in all of your database assemblies, brings in the quantities from Assemble, creates a memory mapping, a mapping memory, and ultimately contains within the Sage line item all of the individual instances that are associated to it. What that means is for setup, there might be a little bit of a process to go through and map things to your assemblies, But if you do it once, then you're going to be able to provide that information iteratively. You publish a new version a week later, and a week later, and a week later. You're actually keeping track or trending exactly how the design is changing and how that can impact the budget. That mapped process is quite seamless in that any new components will visually show you that they've been new, and you need to go through the process of mapping that particular component. Other than that, it's going to be automatically updated, and those quantities will be fed right into Sage. Ultimately, we're consuming that cost data at an aggregate level from the individual materials back into Assemble. In the future, and with the BIM 360 quantification module that we're working on, this information will be fed directly into the Assemble database at a material level. So we'll be able to incorporate the cost and information coming from the Sage application and other partners through the partnership network to incorporate that at a material breakdown within the Assemble platform. So why and what is all this about, and why do we need to go through this process? Ultimately, as contractors, we're translators. We translate scope from the design team to materials, labor, and equipment. You have to go through a process that can be very siloed in a number of cases, and we want to bring that together so that you're leveraging more information and being more informed during the decision-making process. But ultimately, those 4 bullet points in the middle are about what you need to keep this cohesive. We're working very hard on that 2D, 3D inventory where you're incorporating things that aren't in the model, that are other elements into that design that may be a general note on a sheet that you need to say, this is a line item I need to keep track of, and you're going to status that thing as you move through the project. So we're working on incorporating that. You need a uniform system for asset and material management, and ultimately, that's going through the quantification module that we're working on with BIM 360, and that breakdown will be structured in a way that allows you to share that information between that scope documentation on out to what labor and materials are associated to it. And then Josh and John have talked about it heavily, connecting to industry standards. There are a number of tools out there that are focused specifically on workflows to enable individual team members to do their job on a day-to-day basis, and we want to make sure that we're connecting to those systems and providing a structured framework to step through the process and manage ball and court and information around how people interact and engage with one another. So with that, we are booth 714. Come stop by. We're also right in front of the BIM 360 pods and the room next door. Thank you, guys.